There's a charming coastal town in Canada famous for its unusual rocks, crashing waves, and iconic lighthouse. Peggy's Cove in Nova Scotia is home to only about 35 year round residents, yet estimates say it's received as many as 1 million tourists in a year. What draws so many people to the picturesque town of Peggy's Cove? And what's it like to spend most of your life living in this remote place where beauty and disaster sometimes collide? That's all up next on Still Time for Joy, where we share practical advice for weathering life's storms and inspiring stories of resilience. Hello, I'm Sandra Levine, host of Still Time for Joy. My guest today is John Campbell, who lives in Peggy's Cove and owns a thriving restaurant there, really the only game in town. Welcome to the show, John.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm very excited. My first podcast.
Oh, wow, that is exciting. And I'm very honored to have you on the show. So I want to tell you how I know about Peggy's Cove. My husband, Michael, our daughter, Caroline, and I just vacationed there for about a week. We had a marvelous time. It's a beautiful place. I was absolutely fascinated by this tiny seaside town. But for people who have never been there and don't know anything about Peggy's Cove, what is Peggy's Cove like, and what is the restaurant like that you run there?
Peggy's Cove it's a cool spot. Growing up there, I can't imagine growing up anywhere else. The restaurant, we're very, very busy in the summertime. It's pretty hectic, but it's a lot of fun.
But talk to me about the lighthouse and the rocks and what draws the tourists there.
The lighthouse for sure is number one, but the ocean draws people. I think to sit and watch the ocean waves roll in, it's mesmerizing for people. And I know, I love the ocean, and I can sit and watch the waves roll for a while myself, so I understand it.
So not tired of it, even after all these years. I understand that very well. Tell me, what was it like to grow up in Peggy's Cove?
It was great. I really enjoyed it. Peggy's Cove was not just a pretty fishing village, a quaint fishing village, but the people of Peggy's Cove were really special. And when I grew up, there was I think roughly 120 residents. So, and a lot more fishing, a lot more boats, and I remember the characters that lived there, and the fun I had. I had a lot of fun growing up there.
And tell people who don't know, where actually in Canada is Peggy's Cove located? Just give us an idea of the geography.
Sure. So it's at the entrance to St. Margaret's Bay, which is just south of Halifax, the capital city of Nova Scotia. And so the province is Nova Scotia, and Nova Scotia is attached to New Brunswick, which is attached to Maine. So just a little bit to the east.
And I found that when we visited, we did quite a lot of driving, and there were just so many long stretches of nothing but woods and nobody else on the road. You have to understand, I live in New Jersey, the most densely populated state in the United States. So this was wonderful for us to get out and be in the middle of nowhere. And we also went kayaking and on lots of hikes, and it just was great to be in such natural beauty. Now, I know you've also spent time, besides running your restaurant, you've done fishing in your life, and your son is a fisherman. Lobster fishing is huge in Nova Scotia and in Peggy's Cove. People also fish for mackerel and haddock. Tell me what it is like to be out fishing, because it can be very dangerous. You're out on the open Atlantic.
Yeah, and very true. And we're just approaching our opening date for lobster fishing, which is the last Monday in November. It's not a date; it's whatever the last Monday in November falls on. Our lobster season starts, and it ends the last day of May. So you fish during the winter, which is being on the North Atlantic in the winter is no fun. Certainly, some days it's really no fun. You just don't know until you go out, what the day brings. We've gone out and it's probably been, we're in Celsius, but probably like minus 10 degrees, and had to worry about the lobsters freezing when you get them, and ice making on the boat when you're fishing. And then, that doesn't happen a whole lot. Usually if it's that cold, you don't go out, but depends on your catches. If you're catching a lot, you go. If it's safe to leave the wharf, you leave the wharf. When I was young, the lobster catches weren't very plentiful. And I think what's happened is, I think that lobsters are moving north. I think most people are in agreement with that. And our catches have multiplied more, probably 20-fold, 10-fold for sure. When I was young, we would go out and you'd haul, if you hauled 100 traps, if you had 100-pound of lobsters, you would be, thrilled. And now we could have 100 traps, we could have 2,000 pounds. Our area now around Peggy's Cove is getting close to being one of the better areas in Nova Scotia for fishing lobsters. But that's going to change, and that will become Cape Breton. It'll be farther north. 10 years from now, that good fishery is going to be farther north than us.
And your son works currently as a lobster fisherman, right?
Yes, he's a full-time lobster fisherman, and they're getting ready to getting the traps all ready for the season to start, and the boat ready and stuff. There's 250 traps you're allowed to set, so we're hoping for fine weather, and we'll set our 250 traps.
We certainly found when we were visiting Peggy's Cove that lobster was available, and we also went to a place that sells lobsters, Ryer's Lobster, and the owner pulled out a 10-pound lobster and showed it to us and said it really wasn't one he wanted because the meat is much tougher when they're that big, I guess. And I was pleading with him to throw the lobster back, and he said he would.
Yeah. Sometimes a fisherman will bring a big fisherman I know will bring a big lobster to the restaurant, and sometimes they'll say you can have it, and we'll put it in our tank so people can take pictures of it, and we'll use it as a fundraiser. We'll say, everybody, throw $1 in the basket, and then like 2 weeks, and we'll give the money to charity, and we put the lobster back in the ocean.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, that's nice. I love to hear that. So tell me a little bit about how Peggy's Cove has changed over the years as far as the population. You told me a little bit earlier, but tell me more about the changes. There used to be, you said it's 100 some people living in town. Why are there so few people now? I was told just maybe 35 year-round residents.
Yeah, between 35 and 40, I think, is the accurate number. And that's a very good question. I wish I knew the answer. A part of it, I think, is fishing has gone down. So right now, our major fishing industry is lobster. When I was a kid, it was ground fish. It was codfish, pollock, haddock. That was a major fishery. So that fishery, I think there was probably more licenses for ground fish than there are for lobsters. So the decline of the fishing industry, I think, is part of it. I think part of it, too, is Peggy's Cove is a little ways out from, town, kind of. So, and it's very rocky. It's not conducive for wells and septic systems and stuff like that. So it's not going to be the cheapest place you could find a house and that type of thing. So, and then there's the tourists and how many tourists we get there. I think it's fair to say definitely has an impact.
Sure.
Yeah, it's a combination, and I wish we knew the answer, and I wish it would turn around, to be honest.
So, John, as I started to say earlier, while we were in Canada, both in Peggy's Cove and in the surrounding area, we spent a lot of time on beautiful hikes where we were the only people on the trail. My daughter and I went kayaking and were in awe of the natural scenery all around us, had the feeling of really getting away from it all. And of course, being near the sea is truly joyful for so many people. Is that part of what draws people to Peggy's Cove? I've heard that as many as 1.1 million people may visit Peggy's Cove this year, and that's a place that has 35 year-round residents. That actually blew my mind. So tell me, why are they all coming to Peggy's Cove?
Peggy's Cove has become the place in Nova Scotia that's best known, and it's been known internationally for years. When I travel, I have said people have said, "Where are you from?" and I will say Nova Scotia, and they'll say, "Where's that?" And I've said Peggy's Cove to the same person. Oh, I heard of Peggy's Cove. So it is. It's in some cases it's better known than the province we live in. It's very photogenic. I see photographs of the Peggy's Cove Lighthouse everywhere I travel, and I just seen one last week in Florida, in Key West, Florida, in an art gallery. There was a lighthouse, the Peggy's Cove Lighthouse, being sold, and it was a very expensive picture.
I'm sure you don't need any more pictures of the lighthouse at Peggy's Cove, though. Now, while we were there, I mean, we could walk to the lighthouse from where we were staying in about 45 seconds, and that was one of the activities of the day was the walk to the lighthouse, whether it was sunrise or sunset, or there was a storm that came up while we were there. So we went to Peggy's Cove Lighthouse to see the waves crashing on the rocks. It was just fascinating. And we were careful to stay really far away from the edge when there was an active sea. But I did notice right away when we first came to the lighthouse, there are signs that tell you not to get close to the edge. Talk to me about some tragedies that have actually happened at this beautiful lighthouse with people who haven't heeded the warnings.
Yeah, so there has been numerous people that have lost their lives off the rocks of Peggy's Cove. It mostly happens when the sea's very rough. It's we To be honest, I can't think of one instance when it was calm where somebody went in and didn't come back out. So it's like the real live ocean. It's right there. The waves are crashing, and you definitely have to take precaution and make sure that you stay extra far away from. The rougher it is, the farther away you want to stay.
And there are some very unusual looking rocks around the lighthouse. I understand they're granite rocks. It's almost like the siren song with the way people are drawn to the lighthouse and drawn to those rocks. I stayed far away from the edge, but you see people creeping closer and closer to the edge. And when those waves crash up on the rocks, they become very, very slippery. So I understand that in a few cases where somebody did go into the water, because your restaurant is right there, your people and you have actually been called in to try to help with the rescue.
Yes, we're the closest. So it's safe to say 90% of the time that something happens, we're the first local people that respond, and yeah, sometimes it's to somebody that's fallen and injured themselves on the rocks, and sometimes it's because somebody's in the ocean.
And have you actually successfully rescued anyone?
Yeah. But the one that comes to mind the most is there was a day, and it wasn't that long ago, meaning less than 10 years ago. I was walking out the back door of the kitchen with the manager, and somebody came running up and said that somebody had fallen in the water. But they didn't have any details, hardly. They said out by the lighthouse. They didn't know if they were still in the water. And there was another boat at the wharf, and it was the whale watch boat, the sightseeing boat that was there. And when they were approaching the person, they went under the water. and they came back up one time. They got hold of him, saved his life. Professionals say he wouldn't have made it another 2 minutes. So a lot of good calls allowed for him to be saved. Being so quick, getting the boat there, the boat going the right path, because it was rough, and there's a shoal there, and it's not pleasant to go inside the shoal. But if they would have went outside the shoal, they wouldn't have got there on time. The gentleman left by ambulance and wasn't in great condition when he left, but he made it, and in full recovery, and so it had a good ending.
Well, that's wonderful to hear. And now I know I believe about 3 years ago, they built an observation deck right near your restaurant so people can see the lighthouse, and it's a much safer place to look at the lighthouse from the observation deck than it is to go out on the rocks. But you also, a couple years ago, started actually having security guards on duty. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, and it's something that happened a few years ago, and then it was stopped, and it just restarted, and it's such a good thing to happen. There's somebody there to help with first aid, somebody to warn people. They have whistles. I was down on the rocks recently and was doing something to do with a purpose. There was a purpose to me being there, and all of a sudden I heard this whistle, and I turned around, and he didn't recognize me because he was new, and so I got up right away, and I ran up and told him I was on my own property, and I had a purpose to what I was doing, and I knew how to take proper care, and apologized for not telling him ahead of time that I was going to be down there. But it was really great that all of a sudden this whistle went, and you feel good that people are being warned, and they are. These people are doing a great job just letting people know that they're too close.
And you wanted to tell me a story about some of the rocks that are right close to the lighthouse.
There's one rock. If you go on the webcam of the lighthouse, you'll see a rock just to the right of, and it's the only one there that's a big rock. It weighs over 10 ton. And during Hurricane Bill, a wave goes over the lighthouse of Peggy's Cove, and when that wave dissipates, that rock is there. It wasn't there before. 10 tons.
Wow. That shows you
Yeah,
the power of the sea right there.
yeah,
Oh my goodness.
yeah.
And I want to talk about one other tragedy that happened in Peggy's Cove in 1998. That was when Swissair Flight 111 crashed, and tragically 229 people on board all lost their lives. Now, I've read that you were among the very first people to go out and you thought you would possibly be rescuing some survivors. And are you comfortable telling us a little bit about that experience?
I'll do my best. It's very odd. I was sitting home watching the Titanic. Yes.
Oh
And
my goodness.
in '98, that was a 2 cassette, movie. So it was between the cassettes that when my TV went to the news that I heard that a plane had crashed. I owned a whale watch boat, and it was a relatively new boat. I had life rafts for 50 people. The boat held 50 people. It had first aid on it. And so I called the captain that normally ran the boat for me, and a fisherman, and another gentleman who was a part-time fisherman, and the four of us went out on the ocean. When we first went out, there wasn't many, if any, boats out on the water. There might have been a couple, but I think we were one of the first, I'm sure, to go out. We didn't see much, and we just started looking around. Coast Guard boats started to show up, and I don't know, I'd say we were on the water for an hour and a half probably when we found a debris field, and that just continued throughout the night, people finding debris.
And unfortunately, there were no survivors. And I know the people in the area, a lot of fishermen, a lot of people with boats, helped to recover remains from people and their personal belongings. And I've read how the families of those who were lost in the crash were so grateful to have anything of their loved one. And I've also heard that some of the families developed relationships with the people of Peggy's Cove, and we're so grateful for everything that people did to try to help them during this awful, awful time. But how did that experience affect you personally, besides, of course, being very upset by the loss of life? But what else happened to you after that experience?
I developed a fear of flying. That was one of the big, you know, the impact of my life the most. I don't know. Um, I've never talked to a professional, so maybe I need professional help to deal with what happened. But I know, outside of that, it's the non-flying, because I flew uh, fairly often before the Swissair, and I love to travel. So I went 25 years without flying anywhere. Basically, a year today, really close to a year today, I took my first flight in 25 years. I flew, my first flight was from Orlando to Halifax. That's a year ago. So in that 1 year, I am up to 15 flights.
So it sounds like you're making up for lost
Yeah.
time, but how did you find the courage to give it a try again, to get on a plane?
I it wasn't easy. And honestly, it wasn't easy. Like sitting in the gate, sitting at the gate. It started the night before. I did take a pill that the doctor gave me to help relax me. The first trip was definitely the hardest. I happily say the last three flights have been without any pills. And I was afraid that I would have a panic attack, and that seemed to alleviate that. I still worried. My last flight, which was 2 days ago, I like the takeoff. I was a nervous wreck. But the person sitting next to me doesn't know I'm a nervous wreck. Like I'm not sweat rolling down my forehead or anything. But I love to travel, and so I'm gonna do what it takes to travel, and I'm also know that it's a safe way to go. It's just I got to convince myself the plane I'm on is not going to crash, and I know it's not. But it's ongoing, and but I'm very happy to have that many flights in a year, and I got another one coming up in 2 more days. So
Definitely making up for lost time. But going on now to a different topic, I want to talk a little bit more about your restaurant, the Sou'Wester. So, for people who've never been there, boy, this is a big place. So, talk to me about how many people you can serve now, and also how did it start and how did it grow? I know your parents owned a place at the same spot, but it was much different in size. Talk to me about the history of the Sou'Wester.
So, 1967, my dad bought the Light View Tea Room, and it had about 5 tables and a lunch counter, and the kitchen was in the house. The first day they opened was Mother's Day, 1968, and they had to close down roughly 4 hours after opening because they ran out of food. So that was the start of a very successful business, and it has grown over the years. And now it's actually the footprint is as big as the law will allow it to be. With our patio in the summer, we seat around 200 people. We have days that we feed around 1,200 people. And yeah, really busy. We serve a lot of lobster, seafood chowder, gingerbread. We're known for our gingerbread, and we see a lot of group people coming on motor coaches, and some of those motor coaches are off cruise ships. So very busy spot, and we just love it. And I grew up, I was born in '64, so all my memories are being there, and that's all I've ever done other than fish in Peggy's Cove, and that was in the off season of tourism. So it's all I've known my whole life, and everything's been great. I've enjoyed it immensely.
And the first night I was in Peggy's Cove with my husband and daughter, we ate at the Sou'Wester, and I have to tell you, we had a delicious meal. Really enjoyed it.
Right.
So, because of the influx of tourists to Peggy's Cove, and as you mentioned, there are a lot of cruise ships that come into Halifax, and then on very large buses, the tourists come to see the lighthouse, to eat in the restaurant. There are also artists that have shops, and there are other places to visit. There's a little church in Peggy's Cove. While we were there, we heard about some of the tensions between trying to keep the character and the beauty and the peacefulness of Peggy's Cove on the one hand, and also welcoming a huge amount of tourists on the other hand. So how do you make those two things work together? And as the owner of what I assume is the biggest business in town, what do you think is the best approach as far as making those work together?
Yeah, and I don't have the answers, unfortunately. I think part of our problem is that nobody's really that has the authority and has really looked at our population decline and that it's not all because of tourism, and I don't know how much of it is because of tourism. And I think that the survival of the village will depend on balance between fishing, tourism, and residents' needs. And unfortunately, I'm not sure what the answer is, but it's not going to help tourism for the population to go down anymore. You know, it's not healthy. Peggy's Cove being a vibrant fishing village is what people come there for. And if that gets lost, I could go out of business. So I want there to be a thriving residential, part to Peggy's Cove. I want there to be a strong fishery in Peggy's Cove. I think one of the problems right now, and I may be wrong, but I think one of the problems is our population is down to in the 30s, and everybody has their own thing. So, and there's a lot more people now that have an investment in Peggy's Cove that don't live there. So their concern is their investment. Residents that live there and own property, they want to see a thriving residential area. And I live there and I own a business there, and I remember growing up there and my fond memories of growing up there, and I hope my grandkids can, have that as well. And so I don't know what the answers are, but I think the longer we wait to tackle the problems and the issues, the less chance of fixing it there is.
Yeah, it's an ongoing discussion, ongoing give and take. I know there's a Peggy's Code preservation area. I know there are new bylaws. I know there's a master plan. So it's all under discussion and looking for solutions that are good for everybody. Yeah, it must be a challenge for you to get employees to work at your restaurant when there's only 35 residents.
Most of our employees live within 10 miles either way. And we have a lot of employees that are older than me and have been there. There's a waitress there, her name's Sharon, and she has been there for over 50 years. And we have a lot of people that have worked for us for a long time, and it's our employees that really, our business is our employees. And so it's not as hard as you would think. We do have 100 employees in a community of 35, but we most people live close by, and we don't have a lot of turnover. There's so many positions every year that turn over, but it's not as many as you would think, and we have a lot of people that have been there more than 10 years for sure.
Yes, I can see why they would like working there, and I certainly can see why all the visitors come to Peggy's Cove to see the beautiful sea, the beautiful lighthouse, and experience the charm of this small little town. So finally, as we're wrapping up now, John, talk to me again about your feeling about the sea. I'm always encouraging people to go to the ocean if they can, if they live near a river or a bay, or even the woods, whether you're going for blue spaces or green spaces. can be really good for the soul, for the mind, for the spirit. Talk to me about your relationship to the sea. Is it an integral part of who you are?
Yeah, for sure. You know, I was thinking as you were saying that 95% of any place I go is on the ocean. And that 5% is under protest because I want to be by the ocean. And about 5 years ago, I went the summer without a boat. And I said, that's the last time that's going to happen as long as I can still move. So I like being on the ocean. I've spent my life on the coast. You know what's funny when I come home? You would think when you get out of the car and you see the lighthouse, that would be the first thing I notice is the smell, the salt air. You get out of the car, and as soon as you smell that, I know I'm home. Waking up in the morning and going out and seeing the ocean. Like when I wake up, I look out my bedroom window and I see the lighthouse and the ocean behind it. What a way to start your day, you know. I look at it and I say, wow, I'm one lucky guy. And it puts a smile on my face, and I start my day out with a smile because that's what I get to see. And when I travel, the first thing I'll do is go look at the ocean, and it just starts my day out perfectly. And even the aspects of, you know, going out fishing. I love to go out fishing, and sometimes it's rough, but I still want to go out. So it's just, I don't know. It's kind of, even though I wasn't born in Peggy's Cove, I moved there when I was 3 years old. I feel like I had to have been born there because I just love going out on the ocean, and brings me happiness for sure.
Well, moving there when you're 3 certainly makes you a local. That counts, John.
Yeah.
John Campbell, it's been so interesting talking to you. Thank you so much for telling us all about Peggy's Cove and the joy of being by the sea. And thank you so much for coming on the show today.
It was my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me, and I look forward to your next visit to Peggy's Cove.
If you found today's show helpful, please share the information with someone who needs it, and follow Still Time for Joy for more practical tips on weathering life's storms, as well as inspiring stories of people who have turned their pain into purpose. Please consider supporting the work that goes into producing the show on Patreon. Follow Sandra Levine Productions on Facebook and YouTube, and learn more at sandralevine.com.